Hello everyone. Today we will discuss a poem of Class 7 Honeycomb book, The Squirrel. The Squirrel is a poem written by Mildred Powers Armstrong. You must have seen a squirrel running around here and there all over the trees. The squirrel is a rodent. A squirrel is a very interesting and playful animal. It's very naughty. You see many a times around the tree. You must have tried to play with it also. It is a very short poem and it's very interesting also. So let's start. You may have seen a squirrel sitting on the ground eating a nut. What did it look like? Here is a poet's description of just such a squirrel. Means you must have seen a squirrel sitting on the ground eating a nut, and also you have seen a squirrel running around here and there, running around the trees, all over the trees. And the poet is talking about the appearances of the squirrel, and this poem is a description of a squirrel uh, in uh, in his own views. So let's read the poem. He he wore a question mark for tail, an overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play. And if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. So, these lines are telling us about a squirrel. In this poem, uh, these lines are telling us about a squirrel. This is all about a squirrel and what the poet notices about the squirrel. The first thing that the poet notices about the squirrel is about the tail or the shape of the tail. He wore a question mark for tail. That's why the poet is saying that he wore a question mark for tail. The first thing the poet notices about the squirrel is about the tail or the shape of the tail. The first thing that is noticing by the poet is the shape of the squirrel is just like a question mark. How the tail, if you see closely, he is relating the tail with the question mark. So he wore a question mark for tail. Then in the next line, an overcoat of grey. This is talking about the body of the squirrel. It is grey in color. The poet is relating that the squirrel is wearing an overcoat. Means the he is wearing a tail. He an overcoat of grey. And what is the color of the squirrel? The color of the squirrel is grey. We know that the squirrel loves to eat a nut. Whenever see a squirrel, they always bends moving here and there and running. But whenever they eat something, they eat in a certain posture. That's why the poet is saying that he sat up straight to eat a nut. So whenever they eat something, they eat in a certain posture, and the posture is they sit straight, just like the image in the poem. You can see the image of the poem. When the squirrel is sitting, his tail looks like a question mark. He liked to tease and play. If we ran around his tree, he went the other way. Means he liked to tease and play. The squirrel actually likes teasing. The squirrel likes teasing very much, because whenever someone run behind the squirrel, what happens? You see, the squirrel will turn around the squirrel will went the other way. Yeah, the squirrel will go the other way. If we ran around his tree, he went the other way. The poet and his friends are trying to catch the squirrel. What happens next? When the poet and his friends are trying to catch the squirrel, what happens? The squirrel went the other way. In this way, the poet is expressing his own experience as a child. Means the poet is expressing his own views when he was child, when he used to play with the squirrel. When he tries to catch the squirrel always went the other way. Whenever he tries to play or catch with the squirrel went the other way. So this was the poem. It is a very nice poem written by Mildred Bowers Armstrong. So let's discuss the question answer. So what would be the first question? The first question would be name the poet and the poem. So what is the name of the poet? Mildred Bowers Armstrong. And what is the name of the poem? The Squirrel. Now the first see the working with the poem. The first question: why does the poet say the squirrel wore a question mark for tail? Why does the poet say the question? Why does the poet say the squirrel wore a question mark for tail? What would be the answer? The answer would be the poet is saying so because it looks like a question mark. Means the squirrel's tail looks like a question mark. That's why the poet is saying in the same way. Now the next question is: do we usually say that an animal's wears a tail? What do we say? What is the answer? The answer is no. We usually don't say that an animal wears a tail. We usually say that an animal has a tail. Now the next question is: he liked to tease and play. Who is teasing whom? How? The answer is the squirrel is teasing the poet and his friends, and the squirrel is teasing by running here and there and running around the trees. In this way, we have come to an end